So it is my pleasure now. I'm going to introduce both of our next speakers, and the full bios are in your packet. So I'm not going to go into a really detailed introduction, but both of these people that you're going to hear from went to UC Berkeley, the Energy Resources Program. LBL and UC Berkeley have had a long history in helping to create the scientists and the policy leaders and the researchers to help bring these things to market. Andrew McAllister is a commissioner with the California Energy Commission, and he's a pioneer in helping to think about load flexibility. He helped create that 7 gigawatt goal he'll be talking about, and he has been helping to think about what are the low-hanging fruit and the pathways for win-win investments in technology for California, and how to partner with utilities and create the policy environment. And then Achintya Mudari is a senior regulatory analyst with the Public Utilities Commission. And during the day, you're going to hear from something called Task 4 in CalFlexHub. And in Task 4, we model the costs and benefits of these different technologies. And that's based on some of our work on the demand response potential study, where we do what's called shape, shift, shed, and shimmy with the loads. The PUC's been funding some of that work, and Achintya's work has been focused on the actual price shapes. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thanks so much, Marianne. I actually, let's give Marianne a round of applause for her incredible career. When I showed up sight unseen to UC Berkeley in 1990, I'd never been to California, applied to ERG sight unseen, just sounded like read all the beautiful things that about ERG, like intergenerational equity and all the different energy issues we were facing at the time. And I got to go here. And I was coming off the Peace Corps and looked like, Grizzly Adams, sorry to date myself. Marianne was one of the first people I sat down with to kind of get oriented in the energy space. And you were so generous with your time. And I just have been ever since. And so I just am eternally grateful. And just the ecosystem, a lot of friends in the audience, thanks all of you. I mean, so much heavy lifting across the years. And California is just a wonderful place to be thinking about this stuff. Lots of smart people, a big enough economy where we can support some of this, a state energy agency and a PUC that get it. And, it's not without its moments in terms, big state, lots of bureaucracy, all that kind of stuff. But in general, our populace wants this, our elected leaders want this. They want us to find solutions. And we believe at the Energy Commission and across the state energy policy apparatus that load-based resources are a resource class that we have to mobilize if we're going to get to the point B that we all want to be at in 2045, which is a carbon-free, reliable, and affordable energy system that's mostly based on electricity. So we have to get there, and load, shape, shed, shift, shimmy, those are the resources that are going to help us mobilize in a cost-effective and intentional way all these demand-based resources. And so we have to make this happen. And it is happening, actually. So it's really a moment of optimism, I think. I mean, we have lots of challenges. We have a housing crisis. We have, very uneven but largely unaffordable energy that we really need to deal with. And this is one of the few classes of resources that provide consistent downward pressure on rates. And so for all these different reasons, it's best for us as the state, it's best for the consumer, and it's best for the environment. As you were speaking, Marianne, I was thinking, okay, winter, spring, summer, and fall, all you have to do is call. Okay. We should get James Taylor as a spokesperson, I think, here, because he's a strong environmentalist, and I think that kind of fits where we're going, although you don't always have to call these resources. So I did want to talk a little bit about what the Energy Commission is doing. Obviously, we're really excited about CalFlexHub and all the innovation and all the knowledge that it's producing. I'm sure we'll be investing in load flexibility after CalFlexHub wraps, and leveraging and building on the lessons of all the projects that you'll hear about today. But there are a number of things we're doing at the Energy Commission in coordination with the PUC and with across the board, across the energy agencies, to to help create, the foundation for widespread load flexibility. We have this 7,000 megawatt load shift goal, which is roughly half sort of what we think of as traditional supply side demand response, and roughly half that's more load modifying, and that is sort of day in, day out resources, demand-based resources that really change load shapes over time. And that we need both. I think we trip over sometimes the nomenclature. People sort of mean different things when they say demand response. I think that we kind of need to retire that, or at least limit the definition of what we mean by demand response to more supply side. And really, it's load flexibility generally, and that can be lots of different things. Yesterday, spent the day down in Southern California with Nostromo, who you're here from. I see Boaz. There we go. Yeah, okay. So leadership of Nostromo's here. They're doing some great work with thermal energy storage in the C&I space. And actually with district cooling systems, which we need much more of in California. And it just makes all the sense in the world. It's better for the utility. It's better for the infrastructure. It's doable in densely populated, city centers. But it has challenges in terms of, paying for that upfront infrastructure cost, getting the buildings to buy in. But those are solvable problems that we really need to focus on. For example, I think we, as Marianne said, we focused CalFlexHub initially on single family and mass market technologies. But there's an incredible amount of potential across all the different building sectors to mobilize these resources for the good of the grid, and to defer capital costs, and to enhance the reliability of the grid. So lots of different opportunities there. So we have the load flex goal, 7,000 megawatts by 2030. That's just right around the corner. We also have two other initiatives that I'll describe very briefly. One is the load management standards, which we adopted a couple of years ago and are built on a platform called MIDAS, the Market Informed Demand Automation Server, which many of you will have heard of, where all the utilities' time-dependent rates across the state are on a web-based platform that's API accessible and that can be automated around. So a third party can, say a VPP provider, or or a service provider, or a sophisticated customer can plug into that server with an API, access their tariff, and automate around that, or a carbon signal, or carbon content of the grid. If you want to, okay, if it gets above X kilograms per kilowatt hour, I'm gonna shift load, or a signal from the CAISO. If there's a congestion signal, and the CAISO need a flex alert, or they go into a stage 2 or whatever, they can send a signal and mobilize resources around that. So it's a targeted way to automatically, in an automated way, to mobilize demand side resources. So we think that's a really important platform. And then third, we have the flexible demand appliance standards, which I think Marianne referred to, which we have done pool controls. So there is a standard as of middle of next year. Any new pool control will have native load flexibility capability. So it'll have to have communications and controls, so that any pool control will be able to, with customer consent, will be able to plug into MIDAS, will be able to participate in these programs in an automated way. You don't have to pool and filter, you don't have to pump and filter your pool at any particular moment. You can move that off peak, right? So we're in the works with water heaters, with thermostats, with behind the meter batteries, EVSEs, really looking at the gamut of highly flexible mass market devices. So really excited about that. It's actually, we're building something new. This has never been done before. So it's taking a little while to sort of get the, things like cybersecurity and those sorts of issues sort of worked out. And what it has emerged to me, Marianne, you mentioned interoperability, is the need to have assurance to set up all of these so that they are interoperable in some fashion. And what that looks like, I think, is sort of TBD, but I'm considering opening a rulemaking about sort of trying to, even mandate or just ensure interoperability across all these wildly different end-use classes, right? I mean, when the CAISO pushes that flex alert, okay, they'll be able to target it maybe by service territory or by sublap, or it'll be fairly precise in that way. But it needs to hit all of the HVAC systems, and not just the Trains and Carriers, but the Daikins and Fujitsus and Mitsubishis. It needs to hit all, not just the Teslas, but also the Fords and the Chevys, right? It needs to hit all of the, and the pool controls and all the other stuff. And so there's got to be some assurance that when that signal goes out, that everything hears it and is able to flex. So how does that, what does that look like? Now, we're a standards making body. We actually have the authority to do that. But, we also need to do that very judiciously. We don't just, I certainly don't just do a rulemaking just to do a rulemaking, in spite of maybe the popular conception of California. But we don't just regulate to regulate. It has to be something that the industry is not doing on its own, and that it doesn't happen in the market. And so if there's a market failure that we need to solve, I absolutely want to do that. And so really looking forward to those kinds of dialogues going forward, because it seems like, we really need, if we're going to get the scale we need to harvest the potential and really avoid major capital investments in the distribution grid for a meaningful amount of time, for example, we really need to have that scale. So, really, we've made a lot of progress, but I think we really have to develop this ecosystem so that it can mature more quickly and more effectively. I wanted to just end with an anecdote. Some of you will know this, but this feels like a historic moment. There's so much. I mean, we are living the impacts of climate change. It's so obvious now, across the board. It's not just environmentalists who know this. Everybody knows this. And so we have, we're fully in the digital age. We've been through a pandemic. I think it's kind of been a bit of a reset. We have a lot of challenges, but this feels like a moment where big things can happen. And I get that sense in California, certainly in the energy policy apparatus, but just kind of across the board. There's a big election coming up, and that's sort of also, I think, made this sense of possibility a bit more palatable, or a bit more palpable, rather. I think we're in a really amazing place in California to lead, to be pushed more sort of obviously or more openly in a leadership position, into a leadership position. Back in the 70s with the oil embargoes, I think was another moment like that. The Energy Commission, the Air Resources Board, were formed right around then in the late 70s. Ronald Reagan actually signed in the Boren-Alquist Act into law that formed the Energy Commission, if you can believe that. And Richard Nixon was doing all those amazing things in the environment. I mean, we're in a very different moment now. But there was consensus about how important energy and the environment was. And that's why those things were doable. That's why you had this consensus that even that made these big political decisions possible. There was a lot of spade work done to sort of create that possibility beforehand, and then the political moment arrived to allow it to actually happen. And I feel like we're in a position where that seems pretty likely right now, to make big investments and think about infrastructure in a way that we just haven't as a society been able to in the last 20 years, 30 years. So maybe I'm an optimist. I'm a glass half full guy, so hopefully I'm right. But I think it just seems like the situation is sort of congealing and crystallizing to create the possibility for big things. And we're absolutely feeling that. In Sacramento, I think obviously we have budget problems. There's all sorts of countercurrents, but I just think the imperative, the urgency of being a leader and helping the nation and the world solve these problems in a way that is grounded in reality, that is technically feasible, that's economically advantageous, and is the right thing to do for our people. That moment seems like it's coming here in the pretty near future. So I'm super optimistic, and I certainly don't want to. I want to highlight also our collaboration with Department of Energy. Just incredible professionalism with from the White House all the way down through the ranks of DOE. Just we're really rowing in the same direction these days and collaborating tremendously. The IRA monies, you'll see some announcements here in the next few days, a couple of weeks, about some of the IRA programs that we're putting in place alongside state programs. So that partnership is incredibly valuable right now, and much more to come in the next couple of years on that. So with that, I just want to say thanks again to Marianne and Kula and Jinjin. Really appreciate all your all your efforts to drag us into this forum. And I know it's not easy sometimes. So really appreciate your flexibility and your patience with all of us. So with me in particular. The Energy Commission is just so proud to support this effort. And it really is path-breaking. It's really showing possibilities, things, what can be done in the world in practice with great partners in all these projects. So just really proud to be part of it and to support it. So back to you, Marianne. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So we are going to manage the Q&A through the Zoom chat. Is that right, Kula? We should, yeah. So there's an app on Zoom, and both people in the room as well as people online. Do we have any questions yet for any speakers, or I don't know if, no, okay. Achintya, let's see. There you are. Oh, I see one question. Go ahead. We don't have mics set up for you, but maybe you could just say it really loudly and I'll repeat it. Yeah.
I was, oh, thank you. Claire Broom, Emory University. I was really struck by the concept of flexible loads, which I think you were using as sort of an evolution from supply side, demand side. And I wondered if you could say, first of all, if I've got your idea correctly, but secondly, will the Energy Commission be collecting their data in a way which lets you distinguish front of the meter distribution grid from resources requiring transmission?
Yeah. So you have a super quick answer. And Achintya, you can come on up.
Yeah, thanks. So Claire, I really appreciate I'm glad you're engaged here today and really appreciate your participation in all of these different proceedings at the Energy Commission and your support. So we actually do have, the Energy Commission is really getting into the big data business. So we do have, we've been collecting interval meter data actually from across the state. Now we have a systematic way to do that. That's happening. That's really opening up a lot of great analytical pathways for us to develop policy and to really target programs in a way that's much more effective with ratepayer and with taxpayer funds, and that also develops knowledge in a much more intentional way. So the short answer is yes. But it's a path to get there in terms of making sure that we can match up the impacts of a given program, with the location and sort of understand where that, say it's a targeted program in a local jurisdiction or something, what that means for the distribution grid and whether it has relevance for the transmission grid. I would say that there's also a conversation happening at the other end of the spectrum about Western markets and how to mobilize. How to take advantage of the geographic diversity of the West to bring renewables more cheaply onto the grid and trade them across a much bigger footprint. And so I think I'm really interested in figuring out how the demand side aggregated resources can even be triggered and mobilized across the vast footprint of the Western interconnection. And that would have transmission relevance, absolutely. But I think it's a few steps until we get there. We really have to sort of walk before we can run. But I think the potential is really beyond, I think, what any of us are really imagining right now at this moment.
Thank you so much. So that's a good introduction for Achintya also to talk a little about the future of dynamic pricing in California. Thanks.
Great, thanks. And I had some slides. So thank you everyone thank you Marianne and CalFlexHub for having me here. I'm an analyst with the CPUC with the retail rates team. And the CPUC and Energy Division have been quite, I think, bullish on dynamic rates. We put out a white paper in 2022. So I'll be kind of walking through that and also giving an overview of where things stand in terms of what are the on-the-ground opportunities for participation in these rates, as well as what is the anticipation on these rates not going forward from not just being these one-off sort of pilot offerings, but being a standard rate, just like any other, which any customer and any service provider can take use of. So let me just, can we advance the slides? So the big part of our motivation from Energy Division's perspective was coming from this angle of, we have all these things, these disparate programs, these boutique offerings of rates that create a pretty muddled marketplace, and just a question of economic efficiency, especially in a time when rate affordability has been so front of mind. It felt like having a single approach was necessary to unlock the market participants to provide greater integration with all the resources that they can offer, and also just better economic efficiency, and hopefully put that downward pressure on rates, as Commissioner McAllister mentioned, because that's sort of very much front of mind for the CPUC. So Energy Division published a white paper called for demand flexibility, and in that white paper there was a framework which is called CalFuse, or the Flexible Unified Signal for Energy in California. And the whole idea, again, was to streamline the potential of these various offerings into a single price rate offering to unlock all the values that are possible through these various programs. So next slide, please. And I don't want to walk through this paper in depth. I think most people here are probably familiar. But in this framework, I mean, there's sort of three core pillars or three core ideas, and that's, one is price presentation, making sure that prices are actually available to customers. I mean, I think this is where we see CEC's Midas as being a really big step forward, ensuring that customers and service providers have access to the price. I mean, if that itself isn't available, then the notion of price flexibility becomes somewhat moot. So ensuring availability of a standard price access, and then the rate reform, the underlying, the undergirding of dynamic pricing, making sure that there are these real-time prices, not just for energy, but also making sure we price in the capacity, because it's not just energy savings that matters when it comes to a capacity-driven grid as we're having now with renewables. It's ensuring that the cost of future build and the drivers of the types of behavior that drives future build is made clear through price. So how do we avoid expansion of the capacity system in a way that cannot be undone? How do we avoid or defer as much as possible expansion of the distribution system? How do we do better management? Because it's really, I think, the challenge looking forward isn't going to be a question of energy conservation. It's a question of capacity management. And I think that's sort of a big part of price design and rate reform that we put a lot of thought in. And of course, then we've had stakeholders weigh in as well on how best to do that. And then the third element of this rate reform is ensuring bidirectionality, ensuring that prices, ensuring that there is a ability to integrate through a price stream, the value for resources that can export beyond the meter. And then lastly, there's these two things. I don't want to, again, dive too much in depth, but the notion of customer options. How do you sort of set up a program of dynamic pricing that is sustainable in terms of not needing massive intervention or not leading to too much revenue and rate instability, but still providing the right incentives. So these elements of subscriptions and transactions, these are just ways in which at least Energy Division believes it's possible to offer dynamic rates as a program that can be self-sustaining and sort of fair to both participants and non-participants in the long run. So now I'll just go next slide, please. So there's an active proceeding, the demand flexibility proceeding, where we've been there's sort of been a push to develop these policies to achieve this widespread adoption of these rates. So what are the guidelines for rate design applications? Because we, thanks to the CEC's load management standards, the IOUs and CCAs have a mandate to offer dynamic rates to all customers by 2027. So, and the CPUC as the rate setting body for the IOUs is adopting guidance in this rulemaking that is letting IOUs know what elements need to be part of these rate applications. So the rate design elements that need to be part of the rate applications, and also what are the systems and processes that need to be built, not just to provide these rates, but also to allow third parties to integrate with the pricing engine, for instance, and how do we integrate prices with the price portals that we have in the state, ensuring that price, not just that the rates exist, but those prices are available in a streamlined, accessible manner. And of course, ensuring compliance with the CEC's mandate. So next slide, please. And there's a lot here, but I think I wanted to show the timeline of what the CPUC has authorized with regards to dynamic rates. So starting in December of 2021, when there were two initial pilot offerings authorized, one for agricultural customers in Valley Clean Energy and PG&E service territory, which I think Sierra Huffman will be talking about, but also in SCE's territory for commercial and residential customers. So these were the initial pilots, and these were geared from a reliability perspective. But then in January of 2024, the CPUC authorized a further expansion of these pilots until the end of 2028, end of 2027. So expanding the ag pilot that I'd mentioned in Valley Clean Energy's territory to all PG&E ag customers with a 50 megawatt enrollment target. Expanding access to C&I and residential customers in PG&E's territory. Ensuring that SCE's pilot also was authorized for a further expansion and extension until 2028. So all of these expansions have been authorized with sort of target enrollments of 50 megawatts, but they're uncapped. There is no cap on these pilots, and the intent is to get as many people as possible to start, and as many service providers as possible to start participating and enrolling. Then later on this year, there's going to be a PG&E's vehicle-to-grid pilot that will be launching, and this will be a bidirectional export rate for EV charging, and it'll be using, again, the CalFuse type framework, and this will be both for residential and commercial customers. So looking forward, 2025 is the CEC's load management standard deadline for IOUs to submit rate applications. So those will be applications for, again, all customers and all classes. And the intent, well, the CEC's LMS requires these rates to be available by 2027. So that's sort of why the rate applications need to be in. There needs to be ongoing proceedings to decide on the actual rate design aspects of these rates. And then lastly, again, the 7,000 megawatt goal, which is quite an ambitious goal, but we believe that that dynamic rates is going to be a big part of achieving that goal. So I'll stop there, but I think, again, I wanted to say that we view dynamic rates as not just a reliability tool, but also an affordability tool. And we think we're looking forward to all the participants here really making sure that we get customers and loads and technologies enrolled, and then really seeing the impacts of hopefully widespread access to dynamic pricing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Achintya. So we're going to let you chat with him in the transition to the next session. I want to thank you for joining our opening session. And this 50 megawatt target for these PG&E and Edison pilots are really the folks here in the room that are going to help make that happen. So a lot of you have technology and are working on this scale up. So thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll easily get to that target and it'll be a very successful pilot. So in the next session, we're going to have a breakout session. So we're going to have the community choice aggregators across the way in Building 91, and we're going to have people to guide you there. And there are also maps in the agenda in your Zoom app. And the utility panel will stay in here, moderated by Emily Nichols. So one thing I didn't mention is we are in an earthquake zone. Most of you are from California, so you're used to this. If there is an earthquake, we have exits here and here and to the front. If you do exit this way, there's a gathering spot in the front where the parking lot was. Yes, yes, and video recording as well. The Zoom is being recorded as well as the PowerPoint. So thank you so much. And so again, we're going to transition to the next session starts at 9:50. So we have 8 minutes to get across the street for those of you who are going to the CCA panel. So thank you.